Welcome to the Observe Day podcast, where we celebrate meaningful moments, awareness days, and the stories that shape our world. September is National Reading New Book Month, a time to dive into fresh stories, expand our perspectives, and discover the power of the written word. Today, we're joined by an incredible guest whose work sits right at the center of storytelling. Sara Lohse is an award-winning author, thought leader, and the creative force behind Open This Book, The Art of Storytelling for Aspiring Thought Leaders. Through her company, Favorite Daughter Media, she helps brands and individuals find and share their authentic voice, proving that storytelling isn't just for books, it is the key to connection, influence, and impact. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Before we dive into storytelling, let's start with books. What's the last new book you read and what did it teach you?
Okay. Define new. Does it have to be like it recently came out or new to me?
Two ways. New to you and new it just recently came out.
Ooh, okay. So the book that I just finished, and I had a feeling you were going to ask me this, so I even pulled up my Goodreads so that I would know the answers. So the last book that I finished was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. So I'm in the business world, and the book that I wrote is like professional development and everything. But I'll be honest, all the books that I read are novels. If my friends put out books, I buy them and I skim them, but I cannot get myself to read nonfiction books. So all of my books are going to be novels. And the most recent was The Last Time I Lied, which is a thriller kind of murdery, mystery-ish type book.
Okay. I was about to say, what did they teach you? I didn't realize that it's a novel. I mean,
it taught me not to trust people, especially if they own summer camps where young girls tend to go missing, which is a very important lesson everybody should learn.
Okay. When you choose a book, right, and a book to read, how do you personally approach choosing it? It's like, oh, is it the best voted book on Goodreads, or the best selling on Amazon that you're like, oh yeah, this is best selling, I should read this book?
Ooh, I think for when it comes to like the novels, it's usually if I love the author, I will read everything that they've ever written. Or if I just need a book, I use Libby, which is an app through like the library system in the States, and you can borrow ebooks for free through the library. So I will just get anything in like a genre that is available at the moment and just hope it's going to be good. But I do have a book that is on more of like the businessy. I learned a real lesson book that I can recommend if that is more helpful than not trusting summer camp people.
What's that book?
Steal Like an Artist.
Austin Kleon.
Austin Kleon. Yes, I'm so glad that you know the book. He is absolutely phenomenal. He has inspired so much of my writing, my creative process, everything. I asked him to write the foreword for my book, and he very politely declined, which I will try not to hold against him. But that book is so fantastic. It is all about figuring out how to be creative and being okay with not having a unique idea, but taking an idea that you love and turning it into something unique.
Yeah. Well, I like the book. It's short, easy to read, and it's not dense.
Yeah, and he writes with a lot of pictures, so it's like fully illustrated, which I love. You can read it in an afternoon, but there's so much wisdom in it, and so many just great ideas for you to just be more creative and insert more creativity into everything you do.
Yeah. Your book, Open This Book, it's about the art of storytelling. I'm curious, what inspired you to write it, and why did you feel that this book needed to exist?
That's actually a fun question, because the reason I wrote it was because someone told me to. I never thought I would write a book. I outright said I will never write a book. And apparently I just succumbed to peer pressure really easily, because I was talking to somebody who was a publisher, and he's like, you tell stories naturally. Everything that you do is about storytelling. You need to write a book. And if you do, let me know. I want to work with you on it. And I was like, you're crazy. That's never going to happen. Okay, maybe. And I had a really interesting story that was the basis of it. And I thought that there were a lot of books on storytelling. There were a lot of people speaking about storytelling. And I felt like there was a piece that was missing. And it was about telling smaller stories and less important stories, as weird as that sounds. And when I was doing research and just really digging into the whole concept and where I wanted it to go, it just started to feel like something that was needed. And if there were people out there who didn't think that they had an important enough story, and if I could teach them how to tell their story in a way that made it seem important, then I will be satisfied. So I gave in to peer pressure and I wrote the book. And I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. You said the book started from a story. What's the story? Well, like a base, the story has its base. What's that story?
So I learned how to tell a story by accidentally getting booked on one of the biggest finance podcasts in the country to
Okay.
tell a story about that time I got a really embarrassing tattoo when I was on vacation in Ireland. And that is not the kind of story I ever expected to tell on a like award-winning, amazing, really professional podcast.
Okay.
And he asked me to be on the show because of the punchline of it and how just bizarre that the story was. But he needed to make it a valuable story, and it really wasn't, or at least I didn't think it was. And he interviewed me in a way that made it valuable. He interviewed me in a way that brought out value and connected different pieces of the experience together and really made it into this life-changing experience that I knew that I'd had, but I didn't tie it all together.
Yeah.
And while he was interviewing me, I basically learned how to tell a good story. And I learned that good stories happen to those who can tell them.
Oh,
And I wrote the book through stories, using stories as the basically the educational part of it because I'm teaching you how to tell a story. So I do it through stories. And it's based on that story, not only the one that I told about the stupid tattoo, but the story of learning how to tell a story while telling a story. So it's kind of meta. There's a few layers there, but it's all based on I went to Ireland and I accidentally got a tattoo that looked like a penis.
you've shared the story before in the previous interview.
I did.
Yeah. And that was more like the thing that was like, oh yeah, it's exactly the same person that you think you interviewed. That's the exact same person you're interviewing. I was like, yeah, the story exactly.
I think I'm the only girl with the penis tattoo. That has become my name in the industry, and I'm okay with it. But it's definitely unique. There's not another one.
While you were talking about the book, you said it was all based on the idea of instead of this big story, which is nice, talking about those specific moments, stories, and little moments, and compiling them together as stories. And can you expatiate on that? Before we dive deeper, I'd love to invite you to join the Observe Day newsletter. Every week, I send you highlights of upcoming observances, creative ways to celebrate, and behind the scenes extras from the shows. It's the perfect way to stay inspired and never miss a meaningful moment. Sign up today at observeday.com/join. That is observeday.com/join. Now let's get back to the conversation.
So, something that I've seen a lot with people when I talk about storytelling is that they think that they need to have this big, dramatic or traumatic story. And it has to be, if they're going to tell a story, it has to be like that one that changed their life.
Yeah,
And we all have one of those stories, but not everyone is comfortable telling them. And even if you are comfortable telling them, it doesn't always fit what you're trying to do. So when I talk about storytelling, I talk about it with a goal in mind. It's usually for a business purpose, or you're talking on stage somewhere, you're talking on a podcast. You're not just telling a story to help people get to know you, but having them get to know you has to be part of it. So people think that because they want to open up and have people know who they are, they
yeah,
need to tell that story. And they don't. There are so many other stories. And we don't really realize how valuable a story can be until we stop and try to figure it out. Just like I didn't realize that I could change my whole life because I told a story about a stupid tattoo. Like I never thought there was value in that story. I just told it when I was bartending to get sympathy tips. And suddenly I tell it on podcasts and stages across the country. So what I wanted people to understand is that you can take smaller stories. You can take basically any moment in your life and make it a story. You just have to know how to tell it. And that's going to help you tell stories that are relatable because People don't always relate to those big, oh my God, moments in our lives, but they relate to the little ones. So if you have a message that you're trying to get across, being able to just tell a smaller story that just relates back to how you learned the lesson that you're trying to teach other people, what was happening when you were learning the lesson. Those are smaller moments and smaller stories that seem less impactful, but if you tell them right and you tell them to the right person, it's going to have an impact on them.
Many aspiring writers, leaders, experts struggle with finding their own story. Like, well, I don't really have any story to tell. No, my life is just boring. I mean, like, there's nothing really fancy about it. What's the first step you recommend to uncover a story worth sharing?
Well, the first is just to stop thinking that you don't have one because you're automatically wrong. Something has happened in your life. You've done something. So there is a story there. So just throw out that whole idea of you don't have one. But I think the problem is that people try to start with the story instead of starting with the message. So if you just sit here and think like, okay, I need to think of a story. You have X number of years worth of stories. You have so many experiences that is just, there's too many options.
Okay.
And that can be really overwhelming. And you don't know what you're looking for. So if you just sit here and think like, okay, let me come up with a story, it's not going to work. Or you'll come up with one, but it's not necessarily the right one. So instead, why are you trying to come up with a story? Why are you trying to tell a story? What is the purpose? What is there a message you're trying to teach people? Is there something you're trying to get them to understand? If you start there, and instead of just like, okay, here's a story, I need to tell it, it's here's a message that I need to get across. The story is just how you learn that message. And the story will basically reveal itself because if you have a lesson that you're trying to teach, you had to have learned it. So what the story is going to be just talking about the experiences that you went through when you were learning that lesson that you're trying to teach.
You know, at the beginning you started with you love to read novels, you love to read fiction. No, yeah. And I'm curious, when we read a book, right? How do we go beyond just reading the book and say, okay, well, how does this relate to my own journey?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. And this actually makes me think of I was at Podcast Movement a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody who hosts a podcast about Tolkien's work, so Lord of the Rings and everything,
Yeah.
and all of the other stuff around the Lord of the Rings. I've never read or seen any of them, so I was not that helpful on subject matter. But he was trying to figure out how he could tell stories and tell his own stories in the podcast because he's like, I'm just talking about someone else's story.
Yeah.
But when he had been telling me about his show, he was already telling me stories without realizing it. And I think we have to kind of take a step back and I think people overthink storytelling. And they think that a story has to be long and complex or have characters or have like all of these different elements. Like they really don't. A story just has to be you talking about something that happened once. And so if you're thinking about something like Tolkien or Lord of the Rings and you want to talk about it for more personal, you're just talking about your experience around it. And so he could talk about the first time that he introduced it to his kids. He could talk about why he ever started reading it in the first place. And thinking about not so much of I want to tell a story, but I just want to share about what happened in my life and how I got here makes it a lot easier to digest, I think. And so when if you're talking about novels, like the one that I just read was about a summer camp, and I went to summer camp once and thankfully didn't get murdered like some of the girls in this book did. So there's not always that connection, but I think it's more so your experience around it, not necessarily the experience in the book being the same. There's a book that I always recommend, and I've recommended it without telling anything about the book. They don't know anything about the plot. But what I tell them is when I read this book, there are jump scares in movies, and that is normal. There are not often jump scares in books. When you are physically sitting there reading a book, there should not be a jump scare. But this book was written so well that I screamed and threw it across the room. And I have recommended that book so many times, telling just that. And every single person has gone and read that book. They have no idea what it's about, and it doesn't matter. But I told them the story of my experience with it, and how just unique that the experience was for a book, and it made them want to read it.
Wow. I think part of the things that give volume and depth to the message we want to share is our story. Because, like, oh yeah, I tell that's the lady versus someone just come up and share the same message, and there's basically no story. And like, I mean, it's just like ChatGPT gave us a piece of advice. I mean, yeah, it's nice, but nah,
Yeah, our stories are the only things you can't get from ChatGPT.
yeah,
And
which makes
that's
it
why
more
they are
important.
automatically just more valuable.
Yeah, I did prepare a lightning round for you.
Ooh, okay.
It's very short, and you ready?
Yeah.
What's the favorite book you've ever read?
The Harry Potter series.
Okay, what's a story you wish you had written?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I am naturally a storyteller, but I tell stories that happened in my life. I don't think I actually could write a novel. I
Okay,
don't, my brain can't focus enough to actually create that entire storyline and all the plots and subplots and characters and weave it all together. So honestly, the story I wish I could write is just one, just a story, because I've
okay,
never written a story. I've just told my own.
okay. What's a story you wish you had lived?
Ooh. Harry Potter, minus the Voldemort part and Umbridge. I would love to be in
Uh,
a wizarding world and go to a wizard school and pretend that this is normal. And
mm,
I think they
yeah,
take a lot for granted in that, because even history of magic, which is super boring in the school, would be really interesting because it is literally about magic.
yeah. What's the first book that made you fall in love with reading?
I loved Junie B. Jones books when I was a kid. Those are, I think that's like the youngest I remember reading. I used to read every single book that was a Junie B. Jones book. I don't remember who wrote them. But if Junie B. Jones put out another book, I read every single one.
Okay, what's coffee or tea while writing?
Coffee.
Okay, what's one word to describe your storytelling style?
One word. Hmm. Backwards. I start with the punchline.
Uh, well, thank you so much. Uh, you've talked about the book, open this book all through the conversation. Um, I'm curious, where can listeners connect with you and also explore your work and get a copy of Open This Book?
Yeah, thank you. If you go to openthisbook.com, it talks all about the book, as a link to Amazon to go get it. And while you're there, you'll see my socials, my services, my company, all the things about me. So openthisbook.com.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'll put all the links you mentioned in the description and the show notes so listeners can just click and go directly to the site.
Perfect.
That's it for today's episode of the Observe Day podcast. Thank you for spending your time with us as we explore today's observance. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend who'd love to celebrate life's special days too. Don't forget to join the newsletter at observeday.com/join for more observance stories, tips, and updates. Until next time, keep finding meaning in every day.